I thought we'd be bumping up against pizza time now, and I was gonna cut out two little things that I think I'm gonna go ahead and, with your kind permission, I would like to do. One, many of you know what it is. It's one of my fondest reminiscences of Dr. Carr. Doesn't have a darn thing to do with sea turtles. Has to do with Peter Pritchard and with Peter Malin mentioned Herpetology of Florida, published in 1938, and in that volume, Dr. Carr talked about a salamander called the rusty mud salamander. Sea turtle people are going back there soon. Well, the rusty mud salamander at that time, in the 1930s, all of the records for that salamander were in the region around Gainesville. I wonder why. Because that's where the biologists were. The Santa Fe, the Swanee, that stream draining eastward to the St. Johns, all from the uplands there. And when he put together his Herpetology of Florida, he gathered those records, the records for the rusty mud salamander, and there was one, oh gosh. Give me a minute. Your seat. And he found one record of that salamander from Seminole County. Some of you might know the little town of Chuleota, Florida. Even to this day, there's not much, it's just a wide spot in the road. But there was one record of the rusty mud salamander, Pseudotriton montanus, from Chuleota. And in his book, he put, that's the range of the salamander, Alachua, Marion, and the region, Putnam, region around Gainesville, and possibly, he said, in parentheses, he put possibly Seminole County, which is about 100 miles south of any of the records that he had and knew about. He told me personally that he did not believe that record. He thought it was a mistake. And then, in the early 70s, we began to collect rusty mud salamanders, especially in an isolated wetland sort of across the road from the new Florida Technological University, now the University of Central Florida, in northern Orange County, just about the same latitude as Chuleota, and not all that far from away as far as the crow flies. And so in 1972, a group of us biologists from the state of Florida got together at a place called Camp Macquarie in the Ocala Forest. And it was, I know Sybil Pritchard, I've talked to her about it recently, I know she remembers that it was a cloudy, ugly, rainy day. Peter Pritchard, by the way, was kind of the leader of that effort. He became the overall editor of the F. Crepa volume, Florida Committee on Rare and Endangered Plants and Animals. And that day, now remember what I said, Dr. Carr did not believe that record from Seminole County because 100 miles south of anything else he knew about. That day I took him a jar of about 8 or 9 larval salamanders, and he took them and he held them up to the light and he said, "By golly, and I thought Coke got a Florida label in a jar of Georgia salamanders." And so, in other words, we've proved, and we've proved since then that this salamander is indeed in the Econ-Lockhatchee drainage, for those of you who know Orange and Seminole County. So that was my reminiscence that I wanted to. Oh, wait a minute. Here's that jar of salamanders. Here's that jar of salamanders that Dr. Carr held up to the light. How many years ago was that? 1972, 37 or something like that? I suspect his fingerprints are still on the jar. This is the very jar of salamanders. So there's more to the story than that, but I won't prolong, because there is one more thing that I would like to do. I'd like to finish up. I'd like to, as the conclusion to our session here, I'd like to let you know that when we first began to think about it and let people know about it, we got some really nice responses from international sea turtle biologists, some of whom most of you are somewhat familiar with. I hadn't planned to do this, but it won't take very long, and I think it might just be a bit of a fitting way to close our session here. I had planned a evangelical conservation message and to inspire you all to rekindle your support of conservation and so forth and so on. But let me do this. Let me do a couple of quotes from some international sea turtle biologists, again with your permission. George Hughes, the preeminent sea turtle conservation biologist from South Africa, says, "I shall certainly be with you in spirit and would appreciate your expressing my best wishes to the gathering. Archie was certainly my inspiration. I loved his books, and one should not forget that he was an external examiner for my PhD. So his enthusiasm more or less gave me a good heave, H-E-A-V-E, heave down the road of my career." George Balaz, everybody knows George, the Hawaiian, been doing sea turtle biology in Hawaii for almost 50 years, says, "Truth be known, at my then isolated location here in the Hawaiian Islands," now all caps, "no one person had more influence on my life with turtles than Dr. Carr. When all is said and done, I'll end up thanking equally two persons in my life for lighting the spark and keeping it burning for nearly 50 years now, Dr. Carr and my wife Linda." And finally, from Cullen Limpus in Queensland, Australia. Cullen says, "I wish I could join you all when you gather to remember Dr. Carr at Melbourne Beach. Like many others, Archie had a significant influence in my development as a sea turtle biologist. He was a referee on one of my first papers, and like George Hughes, he was an examiner on my PhD thesis. I first met Archie when he visited Queensland in 1974. The next time was when I visited him and Margie at Tortuguero in 1976. Peter, Annie, does that ring a bell? Because here's what he says next. That is when I first met Anne and Peter Malin, covered in black sand and weighing nesting green turtles. I still value my memories of the numerous meetings with Archie over the years and the insights that he gave me during those meetings and via his published papers and books." That's
great stuff.
That's great stuff. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Hey Vince, is the pizza here?
Pizza is almost here.
Pizza is almost here.
Within a minute or two.
Within a minute or two. Well, then I'm going to give you one more reminiscence. Unless you just want to talk among yourselves. One more. Back in those early days, in the early 80s, when we first began capturing and studying juvenile green turtles in the Indian River Lagoon next door to us here, I was talking with Dr. Carr, and then I just sort of let it drop casually and off the cuff that I just assumed that those green turtles, those little green turtles in the lagoon next door, were hatched out here from green turtle nests on the beach, right here, this beach, right here. And even though there wasn't very much green turtle nesting going on at the time, and I just said, yeah, well, just in the course of the conversation, I sort of let it drop that that's what I assumed. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, Lou, why do you think that? Those little green turtles could be from anywhere from here to hell and gone." Chuck, wasn't that one of his favorites? That was, I heard him say that quite a few times. From here to hell and gone. And of course, the genetic work, Dean Bagley's master's work, and now later, a lot of work that Brian Shamblin has done has pretty much shown that he was right. The green turtles in the Indian River are pretty much from Florida and Mexico and aves, but there are some from everywhere from here to hell and gone, and that was one of his favorite phrases. So that's as an anecdote, and thank you again for being here and being such a good listeners. Maybe we'll see you again sometime.